I'm actually talking to you from very close to my childhood home, and what you see behind me actually tells a lot about how I got started. I was very lucky to have been born on a farm in northern Illinois, right on the state line of Illinois and Wisconsin, and my dad was a turkey farmer, and he died in 2000. But we have here in the basement, we have a few items of his clothing and a couple of, you see the pictures of turkeys on the wall, and we were kind of an odd duck locally, frankly, and that there was no turkey farming in hundreds of miles. But my dad did that and did it very well, and I was involved in all aspects as a farm kid, including helping process the turkeys every Thanksgiving. That's the larger context for the answer about. I was very also fortunate to be raised in a very a country school, a country church, Lutheran church. And even though there was nothing fancy about these places, they sure believed in music and little kids making music. And boy, one of my first memories is of putting on the choir robe, as my mother tells me I was probably about 4 years old when that would have happened, and started singing in the little kids choir. Fast forward a lifetime, and or at least 10, 15 years, and that led to Luther College to sing under Weston Noble and Bruce Tamman and other conductors at Luther, and fall in love with singing, and then and think about, could it be a career? Yes, no, otherwise. When you're 20, 22, sometimes you know these things, sometimes you don't. I didn't really, but have found my way. But also in the time at Luther, discovered that I love to write. And so writing and singing in choirs and singing solo as well became passions. And I just kept going at them, kind of knowing nothing, but just keeping doing them. And while I got started in a career in radio, and there hasn't been a tremendous amount of planning involved. I wish I could say this was all plotted out beautifully when I was that 4-year-old putting the choir robe over my head, but it was really it was one step after another. Just like, oh, this looks interesting. Let's try this. This looks like a good opportunity there. So Luther College for 4 years, English major, voice major, and then the college radio station. And that's how I got started, and kind of nothing fancier than that.
Okay. After you graduated,
I took, like college seniors do, many of them, if not most, take the GREs to see, get some sort of grading to get into graduate school. In all honesty, it's embarrassing, I didn't do very well on them. and that also might have been resonating with the point where I was kind of exhausted with college. At that point, you're 16 years into an education, and I think I was kind of done at that point. So graduate school did not happen immediately, but I'd started as a sophomore working at the college radio station. At Luther College, small AM station there. And I was the classical music guy because I was studying vocal music. And when you study vocal music, you have to learn German, French, and Latin. And so literally the college station program director called me up one day and said, the guy who normally does this air shift just called in sick. And we can't find anybody who can say these names on the radio, and we think you might be able to say these names on the radio. Can you show up here at 1 o'clock? And so I did, and I stuck with it. So that was the plan as much as possible. No graduate school, at least right away. And then I got a job as an announcer at a local public radio station, not far from where I was raised. Actually, I applied all over the country. And the only one who took me up was the one that happened to be kind of in the backyard, and that was in DeKalb, Illinois, at Northern Illinois University. and that's how it got started. That was the plan: is to get a job and see if I can pay rent, see if I can be an adult, see if I can, get life started that way.
Uh,
I was very happily in situated in DeKalb, Illinois. It's not a large town. It's got a big university and a good university, Northern Illinois University. But this was the college radio station, and I spent one season singing with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra chorus. And under Margaret Hillis, and did some concerts with Sir George Solti, and that was a thrilling experience. But the distance between DeKalb and Chicago is not insignificant, and I could only do that for a season, and before I kind of burned out just driving back and forth late at night, getting up early morning for the radio shift, and that just wasn't working. um, I was there for 2.5, almost 3 years, and then an opportunity came up at Minnesota Public Radio. I'd been at a conference and met a gal there, and we just hit it off as friends. And she called me up one day and said, "There's this opening here at in St. Paul, and you may want to know about it." And I applied for it and got the job and moved everything, left DeKalb and moved to St. Paul, and was there for 10 years, announcing and producing programs, doing live broadcasts, and falling in love with live broadcasts, the kind of the adrenaline rush of live broadcasts, in particular. And then was newly married at that point. And my wife and I had itchy feet, and I always loved the German language. I love, so much of the music that we do in classical is kind of for better for worse. It is from the German speaking countries. But at that point in my career, I was really in love with Schubert and Bach and Mozart and Beethoven and Bruckner, and they all were from the Germanic countries. And I thought, I would love to go live and speak that language and learn it and polish it. And so an opportunity came out of the blue. Wasn't looking for it. Story of my life, actually. From a colleague who was leaving a position at which basically German state radio, and it's called Deutsche Welle, which means German wave, and it's shortwave. And they needed somebody who did what I did, and they needed somebody who could speak German and English. And so I went to work in the English department of German state radio in Cologne, Germany, and did that for a couple of years. I left Germany largely because for family reasons, my father was in the early stages of what we learned was Alzheimer's. And it became more important to spend that time with family and being a resource for family and being near him than having the thrill of living abroad. So we were there for a couple of years in Germany, and then we came back to the Midwest, and I came back to St. Paul. And he was here in Northern Illinois, near where I'm at right now, in his final years. And I was driving back and forth between St. Paul and the family home a lot. Um, and so that was family life, but also professionally, I was working at the public radio distributor called Public Radio International, or PRI, for a couple of years, and then left there and just did freelance writing. Just really dove into, can I make a living as a writer? Also, I was a brand new father at the time, which can be a kind of a recipe for providing the evidence of how stupid you are to try to start a freelance writing career while you're a brand new father. But that's what we did, and we survived, and I'm still happily married, and it all worked out. And my children have arrived at adulthood. So it evidence is pretty good that it was a good move, but at the time it felt insane. Um, and then a small weekend and evening position opened up actually on the news side of Minnesota Public Radio, KNOW, and the Twin Cities, to just kind of get into one news program in the evening, get out of it, get to the next one, read some headlines, very simple stuff. We call it a board operator, basically, is all it was. And try not to embarrass yourself between one program and another by opening the microphone and representing, the company. weather and all sorts of things. And then a transition, another opportunity came back to return to classical NPR, where I'd been very happily at that point now, almost 6 years earlier. Yeah, about 6 years earlier. So it's a very circuitous, unplanned, and happenstance, and a very happy path back into classical music radio. I could talk about Dale Worland all day. I, you think of the most influential people on your life, and I have several, and he's definitely in the top three. And this goes back to any kind of teacher I've had of any kind. Um, I was singing I was a professional choir singer in a St. Paul church, and somebody said, "Hey, you should try out for a Dale Worland Singers instead of being a church choir musician." And we'd been doing lots of broadcasts with the Dale Worland Singers in my role at Minnesota Public Radio, so I knew his work and knew the quality of his work as a media partner. But frankly, it never occurred to me to try it out for the ensemble until that moment. And somebody said, "You should try it," and so I did, and I got in. That was about 1990. And so for the next decade, I was in and out of the Worland Singers, and I say out of because that also coincided with our move to Germany. So I was very much out of it for a couple of years, and then came back in, and then had one child and left for a little while, then came back in. And he was always very flexible about allowing me he likes consistency, and who doesn't? But he really wanted me as much as I could be in there, and that was a real privilege. And that's not even the most interesting part of what I think about him. Dale has said something that has fundamentally changed my life. And it's a very short phrase. And it is these words. I want to get them right. Nothing is stronger than beauty. That's 4 words. Nothing is stronger than beauty. And in rehearsal and in concert and in recording sessions with him, I have seen him go after that like a terrier. And create it and demand it and sweat every detail to create it in choral music. And beauty is defined in almost limitless ways, but in that field it was choral music. And so often I'm standing there on the risers in the back row of the Worland Singers, and music we rehearsed a gazillion times, and in concert just absolutely choked up. I can't sing because of how beautiful it is, what I'm standing in the middle of. I've never experienced anything like it. And it has shaped my vision for my radio work, for my writing, for my work as a director of Classical Minnesota Public Radio, as a leader. It has become one of my core values is beauty and hoping to create beauty, create moments of beauty. And I owe that to Dale. Full stop. I am so grateful. Starting I think I was probably about a sophomore or a junior in high school, I remember. I fell in love with bicycles. I mean, really in love with bicycles. I thought that maybe I had the legs and the lungs to become a bicycle racer, and that proved to be a fantasy. And I learned very quickly that I have neither the legs nor the lungs to become a bicycle racer. But I did learn that I loved everything about it. I loved the movement. I love the silence. I love the constantly changing scenery. I love the smells. I love the exertion of it. Everything. And for the better part of 10, 15 years afterwards, it was almost like Well, it was something more than avocation. It was became almost spiritual for me. So this dream started to evolve about how could I do something really meaningful on a bicycle, meaningful only to me. And one day I was just looking at a map and across America. I mean, there was America, and I just thought, well, there's the West Coast and there's the East Coast, and I bet there's a road that goes between them, and wouldn't that be a wonderful thing to do? And that was about 4,000 miles. And it just became a dream. And I had the dream for about a couple of years, and it got delayed for just kind of career. Actually, was when I left Illinois to go to St. Paul. But I was in my job in St. Paul for 2 years, and the dream just would not let me go. I became kind of obsessed by it, and I actually went to my boss at Minnesota Public Radio at the time, and I resigned. I said, I'm very happy in this position. I feel grateful for it and for you, but I've got to do this. And I cannot explain why I have to do this, but I have to do it. So thank you very much. It's been a wonderful couple of years. And so I did. And then a couple of days later, she came back and said, well, what if we just hold your job open for you? And what do you think? This is going to take 2, 3 months? I said, oh, yeah, I guess I should be probably about 3 months to do it. She said, well, let's see if I can find a part-timer and you come back to your job. And I was just felt enormously grateful for that. And then packed up my bags, packed up my bicycle into a cardboard box, dismantled it, put it in the belly of an airplane, and flew it to Seattle from my home in St. Paul. Took a bus up to Anacortes, Washington, and reassembled the bicycle and put the rear wheel in the Atlantic and looked east. And that, it was nothing fancier than that. And just putting one foot in front of the other. It's kind of story of my life. Just, okay, what's around that corner? And that took about 7 weeks, all told. And along the way, I realized why I was out there. And it's funny, as much as I'd planned on it and thought about this trip for a long time, it didn't occur to me until I was almost through the trip what I was doing out there. And in full disclosure, I was out there trying to do something very large and enormous to get my father to pay attention to me in a way that I had always wanted and never knew that I wanted until that moment. And that essentially failed. And he and I had a 2 or 3 year conversation after that I returned from the bicycle trip about our relationship, father-son relationship. And it was about when we'd kind of moved through and come to actually a really lovely resolution of that, I realized there's a story there. There's a bicycle trip in the middle of it and discovery. And then this relationship that's so powerful for children and daughters with mothers, daughters with dads, sons with mothers, sons with daughters, sons with fathers. There's a story there, and based on no experience, I thought, let me see if I can put it down on paper. And I started it, and I'd come to know professionally a wonderful literary agent in the Twin Cities named Jonathan Lazier. And there's a funny story here that still there's no explaining it. I had met Jonathan at a couple of events, media events, about something completely unrelated. And one day I'm sitting at my desk and at NPR, and the phone rings, and it's Jonathan. And Jonathan says, Brian, I meant to call your colleague one desk over, literally one desk over, but he misdialed and got me. And so we just started talking. He said, what have you been doing? And I said, well, I've taken this big bicycle trip, and he said, well, did you keep journals? You've been writing about it? And I said, well, as a matter of fact, yes, I have. He said, well, send them to me. So I sent him this scrawling pages, and he took about 6 months with it, and he sent it back fine. And I thought, well, that's the end of that. And he sent it back to me with a letter saying, unfortunately, we can't read your handwriting very well. Could could you have them typed up, please? And so I spent the next almost year and a half typing them up. But as I typed them up, this full story came out. And he took that, and now he could actually, it was legible. And he finally said, "Oh, there's a story here." And he says, "If you write this book fully formed," he says, I can sell this." And which I was gobsmacked with, completely floored. And so I did put heart and soul into it for about 3 or 4 more years of writing fits and starts, all the while moving to Germany and back, and then NPR and et cetera, children, and finally submitted it to him. He pitched it to Simon and Schuster, and it was published in '98. And it's my story. It's very much my story.
That's a mark.
Mississippi River of Song is a fascinating project, and it's kind of a couple, 3 iterations of it. It actually started off as a public television series produced by the Smithsonian Institution, and it was a beautiful thing. It was a wonderfully photographed, and tons of interviews done to create the story of the music that occurs along the Mississippi River. A lot, I mean, all the way from the Delta, all the way up to the headwaters. And, you know, my wheelhouse of classical music and symphonic music and choral music was not really part of it at all. It was Cajun, it was blues, it was singer-songwriter, it was polka bands, it was some indigenous music as well, and probably 16 others that I'm forgetting. And just before that was launched, I took another crazy bicycle trip by flying with my bicycle in a box again from St. Paul down to New Orleans. And this was another kind of obsession I'd had. I was like, I want to ride the length of the Mississippi. So in that summer of, well, as many years ago, it was 1987, I think of it, so a long time ago. I rode north from New Orleans to St. Paul, and then struck up a conversation many years after that with a gal I'd worked with, and she was a wonderful producer named Marge Estrushko. And Marge had gotten approached by Smithsonian saying, "Hey, we've got all this great audio and great music for this TV series called Mississippi River of Song. Do you think you could turn it into a public radio series? Because it's heavy on music and interviews." And Marge loved the idea, and I had just ridden the length of the Mississippi, and she said, "You're a writer. We've got these great pictures. We've got this great music. Could you turn this into a radio series?" And Marge Estrushko, a wonderful veteran producer who helped launch A Prairie Home Companion and many other shows, said, "Yeah, I think I can do it." And because I had just ridden the length of the Mississippi, she said, "Hey, you probably could actually kind of give me a first-person view of what does this territory look like? What does it smell like? What does it feel like?" So she asked me to write the series. So I spent the summer, at that point, it was now the summer of '98, as a freelance writer. I wrote the series, and Marge produced it. And it came out on public radio the next year, and it won a Peabody the year following. And that was a delight. It was a real delight. The music, I mean, I learned a ton in that, but how richly blessed we are with different kinds of music of all kinds, different kinds of music.
Yeah.
I first arrived at Minnesota Public Radio as an announcer, as what we often call a host. Some people say DJ, but on the classical side, we call it host. Um, um, the job description says announcer producer. And that means you're on air live in front of a microphone talking about classical music, and then you're also behind the scenes producing. You're in the early years that meant cutting tape, and then it obviously moved to digital. But that's announcing, producing. And after doing the announcing for many years, I just started hearing myself say the same things and tell the same stories over and over again. And I thought, I'm probably boring the audience because I think I'm a little bored. So maybe I better do less of the announcing and more of something I found I really love, and that's production. It's actually a wonderfully creative place to be in a studio when you've got different sounds, different music, different voices, and I found that a great sandbox. I love spending time in that sandbox and then turning that into radio shows. So I did that. And then the opportunity came to lead a small group of people who do that. And then the opportunity came to lead small groups, plural, of people who do that. And I have to give credit to some wonderful managers at Minnesota Public Radio: Mary Lee, Marge Strushko, Gail Over, Sarah Lutman, Don Lee, Nick Kariakis. It's a wonderful group of people who have said, you seem to be able to do this, to make the shows, but also to lead others to making shows. And so doors just kept opening for me. And I wound up in 2010 as the managing director of the entire classical division, which is a staff of about 40 people. And it's the local radio station in the Twin Cities, KSJN. It balloons out to the statewide network of classical Minnesota Public Radio. And then our national programs: Performance Today, Symphony Cast, Pipe Dreams. Websites that now are visited from all over the world, and then a key international relationship we have with a broadcasting consortium called the European Broadcasting Union. So all of this started to be possible with opportunities that came my way. And in a way, it gets back to that, what I said a moment ago about Dale Worland. It's like nothing is stronger than beauty. And if I can continue to find creative ways to make moments of beauty and have them find their way into people's lives on many different devices, anywhere in the world, and have them meaningful to them, then I've done what I've wanted to do. And now I'm a days away from wrapping up my career. Minnesota Public Radio has allowed me to retire a little bit earlier than I'd planned. In this era of the pandemic, there are some hard choices that are facing nonprofits of all kinds. And I'm extremely lucky that I got the opportunity for an early retirement package. And so I've taken that and we'll move into retirement. Still in love with Minnesota Public Radio, still in love with the work, still in love with the mission, and proud of the work we did. But I'm handing it off into incredibly capable hands, and they're going to take it to where it needs to go next. Well, this question about advice for young people is personal for me because I'm now the dad of two daughters who are 23 and 21. So these are young people who are looking, and they're dispirited by what's happened to the world they have grown up very securely knowing, like a lot of us. But for them, it's been an era of really knowing, that there is opportunity out there. And in the last few months, all of that's been put into question. And not just young people, everybody, but certainly the young people who are graduating these days. Like, what are the opportunities for me? And I wish I had better answers. I truly wish I do. And the only one that I've given my own daughters, frankly, is as they've watched me go to work every day doing something I love. And they're very aware that I loved and still love this. And I've just said, please, whatever you do, find that thing you love, and I'm living proof that find that thing you love, keep putting your best effort into it, and the results will take care of themselves. If advice is only best given out of lived experience, that is my experience. I found something I loved. I just put everything I had into it, and have been enormously blessed by the results. And that's all I can give give my own daughters, and that's all I would tell anybody else, is find that thing you love and work your tail off at it in any way you can. And may the results just be something that bless you.